welcome back to At the Glass podcast. I'm your host, Mark. I have a special guest with me for this episode since I'm up in Fort Worth at the in-laws. I have Mr. Kirk here, my father-in-law, to discuss the Baylor season because we're at the halfway point for them and how they're doing. And we'll also discuss the Cowboys season so far since the Cowboys season is about a quarter way through and the NFL season in general. And as you know, for this podcast, I always dabble in with a beverage that is being consumed. And for me, I am having a local brewery from here, from the Fort Worth area, called the brewery's called Rahr and Sons here in Fort Worth. I'm drinking their blonde, which is a Helles lager. It is a light body with a clean finish and a subtle malt complexity. For you those that don't know, a Helles lager is actually a traditional German pale lager beer produced in the southern part of Germany, particularly in Munich. So, and then the German word hell can be translated as bright, light, or pale. So, fun fact, history lesson there from this. And so it's going to be a fun episode. So, Kirk, welcome. Let's have some fun with this.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you. Happy to be here talking about some of my favorite things, my favorite teams. So.
Right. So we are talking about Baylor football to start off with. And I just want to get your opinion before we dive into the stats and of the team in general, how they're doing on offense, defense, and player-wise and stuff. So my question to you is, do you think they are performing, I can't say overly well because they are 2-4 in the season, but traditionally, do you think they are what you expected to be where they're at right now, or worse than what you imagine they would be at right now?
Well, I think we're seeing them at a point in the season where we hoped they would not be at. You know, when DeQuan Finn came in, he was going to be the experienced QB that was going to make smart decisions, have good stats, you know, be able to really lead the team. And that really didn't pan out. And so when he got injured and Sawyer Robertson took over, we saw a change in the way the offense worked. I think Robertson is a stronger passer. He makes better decisions about that. We're also seeing the defense being very up and down. Some games they play great, some games they're playing not so great. So I think there's definitely some things to clean up from that. You know, you mentioned that the Bears aren't doing as well as we had hoped they might be, but they're a handful of plays away from being, you know, if you just assume that, you know, the last game was going to be a loss regardless, they're just a handful of plays away from being 4-2 instead of 2-4. So some positives, lots of negatives. So we'll see.
Right. And the two close losses, one was being the Colorado game where they heaved up the ball for a Hail Mary, completed it, and then went into overtime and were able to, Colorado came out on top there. And then was that in the following week, I believe. Anyway, the BYU game, they were down, got back into it, and then lost that close one as well. So, yes, they could be potentially sitting at 3-2 on the season, being last week's game where they forgot to play in the second half, and then the Utah game where same thing. The Baylor's quarterback got hurt, and then just they struggled either way. But at least the defense held them in the second half for the Utah game to keep them in the game. So,
well, you think about the Colorado game. Had Baylor hit that field goal towards the end of the fourth quarter, that would have put them up 2 scores. They would have won that game outright. But because they missed the field goal, that allowed Colorado to tie up the game, and then we went into OT, and that's when they lost it.
Right. So let's dive in on as a whole before we get into individual players' stats and just in general. We can from there, but as a whole, we'll start with the Baylor offense. All right. And this is all based off ESPN stats. I know you can go to various websites, but this is strictly all from ESPN's website that I pulled. So total yards per game, average per game right now. So the first number is that I put here is where they rank entire NCAA with all 125 teams. I believe it's 125 now with people. And then the next number is going to be where they rank currently in the Big 12 out of all 16 teams in the Big 12. Keep in mind, I know some games have been played since this, and not everyone has played the same amount of games, but this is currently where Baylor's currently ranked as of right now. So for total yards average per game, Baylor is averaging 363.5 yards per game, total yards. That ranks them 89th in all NCAA and 15th, which is second to last in the Big 12 conference.
Right. So when you look at the conference we're in, the times that Baylor has done the best are the times when they had a prolific offense that could move the ball up and down the field, both not only rushing but also passing. You know, the days of getting 400 yards passing and 150 to 200 yards rushing, that's when Baylor did their best. And now when you look at their output today, that's not enough to get the job done. You know, there's just not enough happening on the offense to compensate what's not happening on the defense.
Right. And so that I'll go ahead and finish up just all of the stats for Baylor offense, and we'll go from there. So, like I said, they're averaging 363.5 yards per game. For total yards on the whole season so far, Baylor has 2,181 yards, and that puts them 53rd in all of college football, 8th in the Big 12. For total passing yards, they have 1,371, which puts them 39th in all football and 6th in the Big 12. Average passing yards per game is 228.5 yards, which ranks them 72nd in all college football and 10th in the Big 12. For total rushing yards is 810 yards on the season so far, which ranks them 73rd in all football and 11th in the Big 12 conference. They're averaging 135 rushing yards a game, which ranks them 92nd in all college football, 13th in the Big 12. Total points is 168, which is 46th in all of football right now, and 6th in the Big 12 conference. And they're averaging 28 points a game, which is ranking them 75th all of football and 14th in the Big 12 right now.
Right. And when you look at that, you think, wow, these guys ought to have a better record than they do. And as we've seen, they're a handful of plays away from being much better, having a much better record than they do. I think the biggest issue that we have is the rushing game. And you mentioned that they're averaging 135 a game. That was from some high yardage games early in the season here lately. They've been getting, 75, 80 yards a game, maybe 100, and that's just not enough. Not enough production.
Right. And typically seen when Brow was here in the style offense he ran was just the spread and go, and they had a counter of being able to pass and run, but big run plays too with the running backs. Just for this season alone, they don't, as we discussed before, they haven't had a good running back in a while, like a true, I feel like a good, just hard nose runner that could almost be an every down back. He could do it all, catch, run, and I feel like Baylor has lacked that the past few seasons to get a running back like, oh yeah, that's so and so back there. Like he's averaging 110 yards a game. Like he's the workhorse back there. I just feel like Baylor has not had a true running back that they can depend on without doing a whole committee of running backs back there.
Right. They had anticipated that Richardson was going to be that guy. And last year he did pretty well, and then he got hurt, and he hasn't quite been the same since that happened. They've got a new kid now, Washington, that he seems to be a very very prolific runner or has the potential to be a very prolific runner. And as a freshman, he's been making some plays. He's been doing reasonably well. I think our biggest problem with the running game right now is we're just not getting the run blocking that we need to spring those guys. They were playing teams early in the season that it was easy to run on, and now that we've gotten into conference play, they're finding that running is much more difficult than it was early.
And correct me, Richardson, he's a junior this year, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a junior, and because he was a Big 12 All American or freshman or something
Yes.
like that.
Oh yeah, he was the promise. He was this is our next big tailback for Baylor.
Okay, right. That's what I was thinking. Because when I did my recap the beginning of the season, I remember talking about Richardson, how I was like they looked to him to find his freshman year style running a game. And is he hurt right now? I haven't really followed.
No, he's been playing lately, but since he hadn't really been lighting up the stats. They've started running Washington, and he's been doing a better job. And should have a better he should have a better shot at getting that job.
Right. I'm always if you're not performing, then injury's one thing, but if you just aren't performing, whatever it is, then yeah, and it's like anything, you have to make a change somewhere. So right now, just speaking of just the rushing game, like I said, Bryson Washington is leading all team in rushing yards by 2 yards. Yes. So, yeah, when I say by 2 yards, he has 186 rushing yards on the season, and then Dawson Pendergrass is right behind him at 184 yards, and then like I said, Richard Reese is at 143 yards on the season, and then believe it or not, Sawyer Robinson, who's the QB, is at 140 yards on the season of rushing.
Right. See, now Dawson Pendergrass has really been playing well, and he does pretty well out of the backfield in the passing game too. He's one of those tough, hard-nosed runners that just charges into the line, but he's got some decent speed on the outside. He's not like Washington, but he's got some decent speed on the outside. And he doesn't give up on a play, and that's one of the things I like about watching him run.
So yeah, and also just in rushing in general, it's so they have 7 rushing touchdowns on the season, and Sawyer Robertson has 3 of those 7.
Yeah, so that's not nearly enough for the kind of offense that we need to be running.
Right, and so as you know, you need a balanced offense to open up the passing if you can run, and vice versa. And so, as we were talking about, just the blocking offensive line has done okay at times, but I don't know. They're too more focused on the pass blocking and blocking for running lanes to open that up. And also, is it Mr. Jake Spavital's play calling? Is it just his style? Because for those that know, he came up under Kevin Sumlin. He was A&M's OC after a pretty boy Cliff Kingsbury left to go be Texas Tech's head coach, and then he stepped in, and it was OC, and he got known just to do swing pass left, swing pass right, and that's kind of where it stuck with him, and it's kind of followed him wherever he's been, and it feels like it's the same. Nothing's changed with him, which I figured that wasn't going to happen, but I wonder if just his style of play calling is not contributing to the way the running game should be going for the Bears.
Well, I think that's very true. When you watch the play calling that they have, it's very simple. It's almost rudimentary. It's up the middle, dive left, dive right. And at a time, if that's getting you 5 to 6 yards every time, great. That's fine. But everybody's expecting it, and so they're getting 1, 2, maybe 3 yards a pop on those plays, and you can't sustain drives, at 1 or 2 yards a carry. And I think there's a lack of originality and a lack of imagination in the running game that's really not giving these backs a chance to really show what they can do and to showcase their speed, especially getting on the outside.
Right, and watching games with you, it's 3rd and 1, people. What are we doing here? Running it up the middle. And so,
Maybe
Yeah,
they won't know this time. Maybe they won't be expecting it this time. And
yeah, it's a shocker here. If you always run up the middle, and then the one time they go outside, they're going to be waiting for it because it's like, oh, you've already gone up the middle anyway.
right.
But yes, with Spavital's play calling, it seems like it's the same. It's like when I play NCAA football. I call the same 5 offensive plays, but it's and so watching him call the game, it's just frustrating because it's like, okay, is he limited because of what's on the field, or is he truly like set? Like I have 15 plays, and this is the scheme. If scheme A works, then we can follow in pursuit. If it doesn't, it's kind of like, well, we'll try to make adjustments, but it's probably not going to work out.
Right. Right. I think that lack of imagination and that goes to the players too. If you're not giving them imaginative plays to run that are successful and everything they do is unsuccessful, I think you're putting your team in a situation where they don't believe that they're going to do well. So they don't play as well as they could. Football is such a mental game. You've seen how momentum can shift in a game, and it's not that you have different players on the field. They just started playing differently.
Right. So just affecting the player. And so you're on your take right now at the QB situation with because Robinson came in last year and played a decent amount due to he went to Mississippi State now. Blake Sharpen. Uh, when he got hurt last year, Robinson came in. Your take now that he's played more games, is he doing better than you anticipate him filling in now, or not? Like I guess since most people, I always viewed him that he's a good backup quarterback to have in a current program. I'm not saying that he's a bad quarterback. I just truly, I'm curious to know if Finn is still healthy, is he truly the better quarterback than Robinson, or is Robinson the better quarterback out of Finn if he's healthy?
I think between the two of them, I think Robertson is the better overall quarterback. Finn may be a better runner, but Robertson is definitely a better passer. I think the other thing that they need to work on with Robertson is his confidence in the pocket. If you'll notice, sometimes when he throws the ball before he really needs to. It's almost like a panic throw, and those are never really on target. So early in the game, for example, the last game against Iowa State, he did great in the first half. He did great. And then they changed their scheme a little bit in the second half and unsettled him in the pocket, and then he started missing a lot of throws, and some were very easy throws that he was just missing because he just got rattled. So they need to work on calming him down there in the backfield.
Right. So right now Robinson on the season, he has thrown for 1,045 yards, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and has been sacked 5 times. And before Daquan Finn got hurt, which he got hurt in the second game of the season against Utah, he had only at point thrown for 307 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, and sacked 4 times. So, yeah, as far as QB, so Finn, was it a shoulder injury that he's out with, Finn?
That's right. I think that's right.
And did they say how much longer Finn's going to be out? I haven't seen the latest status or update on Finn's injury, when they expect him to be back, if he is going to be back this season. So
I haven't heard anything definitive. I think part of the deal is that Robertson is probably doing better than they anticipated that he would as the second string quarterback. I think that once Finn is ready to play, I think he's probably going to wind up being the backup. If I had to make a guess, I think he's going to be the backup.
gotcha. So with looking at so they're on a bye this week. So when they come back, so I know we haven't touched defense yet. We'll get there, but just talking about for offense standpoint of who they have left rest of the season based off how those teams' defense are. So they have Tech next weekend, Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia, U of H, and Kansas. So I think U of H's defense is decent with the new coach Fritz there, and they've done a pretty solid job. Tech, I know they're 5-1. I really don't know how those teams' defense are doing overall. What I'm getting at is I feel like so far Baylor has faced the toughest defense. I believe I'll have to look into it more as far as these other teams' defense, how they pair up. But I know Iowa State has a stout defense, and Utah was a stout, and then BYU was always strong. But again, BYU and Colorado were winnable games. They came out firing against Colorado to start off with. And BYU, they just had to get the jitterbugs out of them, and they got back into it, but just a late interception on the drive that could potentially have tied it or taken the lead, or would have tied with the touchdown. Then the extra point would have given them the lead. So yes, 2 games could have easily put them in a better situation right now. Not so much obviously playoff contention, but in a contention, still capable potentially playing in the Big 12 because the Utah loss was not a conference game. That was a game that was already scheduled prior to Utah joining the conference. So they would theoretically have one conference loss right now if the 2 other games had gone in Baylor's way. So with that, I'm going to move to wide receivers real quick. Back in the Browse days, since they had such a high-powered offense, like you got to know the wide receivers' names pretty well, just because they were flying down the field nonstop, and so I just feel like there's just the names, and actually I follow Baylor because of Rachel going there, and you went there, and just it's what we watch on Saturdays if they're on, and if Sam's not on, vice versa, for me, and so. For the wide receiver core right now, Josh Cameron is leading the way for the Bears wide receivers with 277 receiving yards on the season with 4 touchdowns, followed by Aston Hawkins with 203 yards, and then Hal Presley with 200 yards. With those 2 combined, they have 3 touchdowns total combined between with Hawkins having 2 receptions and Presley with 1, and then Baylor's tight end Michael Trigg has 170 receiving yards, which is good for tight end production with 2 touchdowns as well. So getting some good solid production out of the tight end slot is always a positive thing. It means they're utilizing at least the tight end and not just as a blocker, which and then Keytron Jackson with 165 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, and Monterey Baldwin 109 yards and 1 touchdown, rounds out all the receiving. There's other ones, but those are your primary targets for receiving. So I just feel like just the names in general, it's just I don't know, maybe Cameron is the true number 1 there. I just feel like most teams you can at least be like, oh, that's their true number 1 receiver, who's their to-go guy. Just feel like Baylor, same thing as they have good receivers, just like the running game, just the it factors and just like I said, the play calling and just building those confidence in the players to stand out and take over a game and get them into the win column when a game is tight.
Right. We don't today have a wide receiver that you can look at and say, that guy's going to do great at the next level, or that guy has a chance at the next level. Monterey Baldwin was supposed to be the number 1 receiver this year. Everybody looked to him. He's the speed guy on the outside, and they were expecting him to be the lead guy. Keytron Jackson has come on the last couple of weeks and done some great work. Trigg, I've been very impressed with Trigg. He's done some really great work the last 3 games. You've got Cameron. Cameron is an explosive player. He's a little inconsistent, doesn't always get open, but he is an explosive player. So they've got some pieces. They've got some guys that they can work with. I think they need to be putting them in a position where they can be successful. And that goes back to the play calling. We need to be a little more original with with the plays that we're calling. Robertson can drop a dime on a long pass. I think they need to try that more often. They're not giving those guys as much of an opportunity to make those big plays.
Right. And speaking of Monterey real quick, so he led the team last year in catches and receiving yards. This year he's, like I said, third, fourth, no, fifth. That's including the tight end. Sorry, no, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sixth with receiving yards on the team, coming from a guy who led last year with 623 yards and 4 touchdowns on the season. So, again, I don't know if it's just looks or whatever. The same thing like Richardson at running back. Is he just not running the proper routes, play calling? It's kind of a, I'm not saying whose fault, but it's hard to say, like, okay, is it him? Is he not happy with the way the play call is going? Like, I should be out there. Like, I did XYZ last year, but it doesn't fit Spavital's style of offense compared to the previous OC, which he's now at Kansas, I believe. So, so it's a lot of, not finger pointing, but it's just for the offense, it's more of just players doing the best they can and doing good when they're out there, but it's not the pure fireworks explosion excitement that was there from several years ago. And even when Matt Rule was the head coach, the offense was fun to watch and had big plays. And I know the offense will never be similar to when Brow was there, just that fast-paced tempo scoring in 20 seconds and then defense out there and then defense pretty much on the field. Like, why is the defense on the field the whole time? I was like, well, that's because the offense scores in 30 seconds. So, yes, they're gassed. And so those games are always fun because it ends up being not necessarily a track meet, but it ended up being like 58 to 38. And so it seemed much closer than it really is. And it was fun. But like I said, Rule coming in down the road had a fun offense to watch. And at the time, and then he left, and then now with Aranda there. But as everyone knows, with this, Aranda's a defensive guy, and so as we transition to the defensive stats here, after in the last season, they parted or he's still on the staff, I believe. The defense coordinator from last year, I don't know if he's still there or not. I
think he still is.
Okay.
I think he still is.
Yeah,
he's just not calling the plays.
Right. So so Aranda is doing the play calling for defense now, which, as you know, he is a defensive-minded guy. He's been a solid defense coordinator at a lot of the schools he was at prior to being Baylor's head coach when they won the national championship at LSU. He was at Wisconsin. He's always had a good defense at a lot of schools he was at. But one of my buddies had brought up a good point with Aranda when he was defensive coordinator, because my buddy went to LSU, and prior to being at LSU, he's like, look at other schools he was at prior, just in general. He always does well the first couple of seasons, and then he starts teetering off in general. He's like, we don't know why that is. It's just because he can't get the players they had when he first came in there. It's like, if he's having a good defense, and it's a big school, you would think you can keep getting those players to fill in those holes, but it just seems like just look at how he's done at the schools prior. Like, he always has a good first couple seasons when he's there, and then it kind of flattens off and then kind of dips downwards. Being a head coach, I know it's a little different. You can't have your hand at all times trying to do everything, but now that he's a defense coordinator, or not defense coordinator, calling the plays for defense while being the head coach. The defense as a whole has, for the season so far at the halfway point, total yards allowed on the season is 2,032, which ranks them 95th all of college football and 13th in the Big 12 Conference. Total yards allowed average per game, 338.7, which ranks them 54th in all of football, 9th in the Big 12. Total passing yards allowed 1,063, which ranks them 55th. And all football, 7th in the Big 12. Passing yards allowed average per game, 177.2, which is 28th in all of football, 6th in the Big 12. Total rushing yards allowed on the season, 969, which is 108th in all of football, 14th in the Big 12. Total rushing average allowed per game, 161.5, which is 90th in all of football and 14th in the Big 12. Total points allowed, 144, which is 88th in all of football and 12th in the Big 12. And average points allowed per game is 24, which is 72nd all of football and 10th in Big 12 conference. So a guy that's defensive minded, has some strong players on defense. It just seems not adding up, I think, on the defensive side of things.
Yeah, you mentioned the rankings where they have been over the entire season, and the key stat there was that they average 160 yards rushing, giving up a game, which is bad. But when you look at the game last week, they gave up 265 yards rushing, and teams are running all over them. And when you talk about trying to keep control of the game, that's the defense is on the field a lot because these guys their time of possession in these games is incredible, and they're just beating up the defense. And with Aranda, I think the thing that we're seeing more with him is not so much that he doesn't have good schemes. I think the biggest issue that we have is that he's not the recruiter that a Matt Rule was or that an Art Briles was, that really could bring in talent that, was considering either going to Texas or going to Oklahoma or going to another large school in the country. They were able to bring some of those guys in. I don't think we're getting those types of players. So when you watch the style of play that the defense puts on the field, they're missing easy tackles. They're in the wrong place. They're confused a lot. And so they don't know where they need to be. And teams are figuring that out, and they're taking advantage of it.
Well, I know when we did an episode end of last football season, I had mentioned that the recruiting had definitely dropped off. I mean, they've done decent in recruiting, but McGuire, who is Texas Tech's head coach, he was the primary recruiter for, and also talking with my buddy who went to LSU, one of his good friends, he's a couple years younger than me, was part of, like, not necessarily, I don't think he did the recruiting part, but he did the stat work. He helped find the players for McGuire as well, and so, like, McGuire, like, wanted to bring him on at Tech as well to help him out and stuff. So, not that my buddy's friend was like, but was basically saying McGuire, being a Texas guy, or a Texas high school head coach previously, schools like that at Texas, that means that it gives the chance for kids to be noticed to go play. So when you have a relationship with a head coach at a top university that was a previous high school coach, gives them a good shot, and just in general. So, but yeah, and I think Randa, being that, I think he does rely on the recruiting to bring those players for him, and I don't know, like I said, I don't know if he's a hands-on guy when it comes to recruiting, or he takes, sits back and he gets involved when he needs to. But yes, the talent-wise took a hit with McGuire leaving the Tech to give him the players that he needs to fit his style of defensive play calling.
Right. So, like, when you watch Baylor play and you watch a guy like Matt Jones, linebacker, he's all over the field. He's involved in most of the plays on defense. Seems like they're calling his number a lot during the game. But there's really not that many other guys that are getting mentioned. And when you talk about the number of rushing yards that they're giving up, they're not stopping those at the line of scrimmage. And that means that you don't have that run stopper in the middle on the defensive line that can take out, you know, 10, 12 plays a game and stop a run for no gain. You're having to depend on the linebackers and the defensive backs to make those plays in the running game. And by then, you've picked up 5, 6, 7, 10 yards on a play. And you know, I don't know if it's the scheme they're running or if they just haven't figured out where to place players to give them the best shot at making a play on the field.
Right. Go to back. I'm in touch with this. Like I said, rushing when watching the game. Uh, they are having a tough time stopping the run. I mean, as you know, Air Force is a run first team when they with that option, and when you are a triple option team, you're going to run the ball a lot, but it is still kind of concerning when you give up 161.5 rushing yards on average a game, and then let alone you gave up 200 and plus last week to Iowa State. So it's definitely been a issue on the defense side to stop the run. But luckily, like I said, looking at the passing stats, they're in the middle there for passing wides, which goes well considering that if a team can run, that you would think can open up the passing. But they've been holding at least the passing in check for most teams in general overall. So, but yeah, the run, they definitely need to kick it in gear this second half of the season for them to get them off the field, get more rest, which hopefully ignites the offense to move the ball and not have costly turnovers late in the game or when it's a close game in general, when it's definitely a winnable game when it comes to it.
So there's some potential there. Like I said, I wrote in one of my posts about the game, if there's a few things that they can clean up on both sides of the ball, it's not saying that they would win, 5 out of the last 6 games, but they would be much more competitive if they were. Because most of the games this year, they've been in the game until some point, and then they just lost it. And so I think if they clean up a few things, they'll have a shot at least to make a bowl game.
So right now, for defensive-wise stats, just individual players, Garmin Randolph is leading the team with 2.5 sacks. And then Jackie Marshall with 2 sacks. And Steve Linton with 2 sacks. And then a couple other guys with 1 sack here and there. And then far as interceptions, I guess as a whole, the team has 12 sacks. And then for interceptions, the total as a team has 5. And Corey Gordon is leading the way with 2 interceptions on the season. And so I think, as you're saying, just getting the stops, getting more turnovers, and getting pressure on the QB obviously results in turnovers. I didn't get a chance to look. I don't feel like 12 sacks is a lot, meaning they're not getting pressure. They're not getting to the quarterback to generate just stops. And so, which allows, like I said, by stops, is just, I know they have, throwing wide, they've been holding him, but just in general, if they can put pressure, it just kind of builds that momentum and excitement on the defensive side of things and causes more turnovers and just ignites the whole team in general. So in general, you're saying if they do that, can generate to wins. And so I was saying they have 6 games left on the season. Currently, they're 2-4. So they will need to come out victory 4 times in these next 6 games to be bowl eligible. Which, depending on if there's not enough teams bowl eligible at 6 wins, then they go which teams have 5, and then they base it off. I think academic. I forget what the tiebreaker is essentially, but they will need to play some good football for the next 6 games and win 4 out of those 6 at minimum to be bowl eligible. And so with Tech on their next game, which is next week in Lubbock, who's 5-1 on the season, which their one loss came to they almost lost to Abilene Christian to start off the season, and then they lost to Washington State pretty soundly, but then they won their next 4 games in a row. But that's North Texas, who I'll come back to North Texas here in a sec because I'm going to ask you what you think will happen with the Randa in general. Then they beat Arizona State, who's not bad this season. Cincinnati's they're okay, and then they beat Arizona, who also has a new coach this year because their head coach left to go to Washington. So they have a new coach. So I'm not saying Texas is bad or good. It's just the teams they beat I'm not saying all schools are bad or good. It's hard to know exactly how Tech actually stands up right now based off those victories. Considering they almost lost to Abilene Christian to start off the season. And then they have the Oklahoma State Cowboys, which they're not. I thought they would have been better than what they are, but they're 3-3 on the season themselves. They're on a 3-game losing streak. So I think a lot of the teams that Baylor is playing are all very beatable if they play good football across the rest of the season. And having a bye this week can maybe reset them, get some guys that are a little banged up healthy again to rock and roll for the second half of the season for the Bears. I guess, like you said, they'll probably roll with Sawyer since he hasn't been playing bad. Just give him that extra confident boost that he's looking for and coming out. Because, like you said, the games that they've been close, the Colorado game, he came out good. They also just had some big specialty teams plays with the kickoff return and other various things as well. But as I always say, if you can get a quarterback who's always kind of shaky to start off with, just confident in the first drive or two, just to get settled down, can keep things moving on the offense is always key. Like I said, so they play TCU, who's very beatable as well, and then at West Virginia, which is tough because West Virginia is just always a tough environment to play in. Then they're at U of H, which, like I said, Willie Fritz took over there, great football coach. He was at my alma mater, Sam Houston, got them turned around, did a phenomenal job there, and I was bummed he was leaving. And it was expected. This was 10 years ago, and then everywhere he's gone, he's won because he went to Georgia Southern because they started a program there and got him, I think, bowl eligible in like their second or third season, and then went to Tulane. And as we all know, Tulane has generally been an average team at best, never always in people's radars like, oh, Tulane is good this year. When he was there, they went to the Cotton Bowl, knocked off USC with Caleb Williams there. He even had a great year last year, and now he's at U of H, and so I'm happy for him. He's going to do great things there. So Baylor goes to U of H. As far as the environment, they'll be crowded, but it's not compared to like West Virginia style or Tech or anything like that. And then they're at home to finish with Kansas. And Kansas has been a disappointment or letdown for me this season based off how they did last year. I mean, they're 1-5 on the season. So
a little bit of a train wreck.
yeah. Just looking based off that, they have very winnable games if they play good football from start to finish and don't have slip-ups from there. So your take, do they at least win 4 out of those 6 to finish at 6 and 6? Will that make them
6-6? Yeah.
So they'll finish 500 at 6-6 by going 4-6. So do you think they go at minimal 4-6 or better, or 3-3, or 2-4, 1-5, or 0 wins?
Well, I have to be realistic. So if I'm looking at it based on how they're playing right now, I see them going 2-4 the rest of the way. They're going to wind up with 4 wins, 8 losses. But as I said earlier, if they clean up just a few things, like you say, all of those games that they have left are winnable games, some more than others. If they play the style of football, error free football, they have a shot. They have a shot at winning those 4 games to become bowl eligible. Are they going to win more than 4? I think that's a tall order. I don't see them doing that. It'd be a nice surprise, but I don't see them doing that. They got to clean up some things if they're going to have a shot at getting those 4 wins.
And with that being 4 wins, so they win 4 games, become 6-6, bowl eligible. Does that? I guess I'm gonna, if they don't become bowl eligible, I'm trying to word it. Okay, for Aranda, what I'm getting at is, does Aranda still have a job if they finish at 6-6 and go to the bowl?
I think that if they go 6-6 and wind up in a bowl, I think he gets a reprieve for a year because that will demonstrate improvement from last year. And then if they win that bowl game, that's some additional validation that, okay, let's give him another year to try to get things rolling like we want them to be. If they go 2-4 the rest of the way or worse, I think he's gone. I think he's done.
Yeah, I saw RG3 sticking up for Aranda, and like I said, Aranda's a awesome dude. He meets what you like, passion. He doesn't show passion on the sideline. He's just straight faced, but he's generally a well liked guy all the way around. He's never in the news for anything wrong, which is a good thing to have for sure. Yeah, I do think if they can get to or finish at 6-6, they keep him for a year again to see if he can improve on that. But if there's a setback at any point the following season, I probably like, okay, it's the same thing again. So I guess because I know RG3 was saying is like, these are close losses he's having, except for last week's game against Iowa State where they got blown out in the second half and wasn't close. Like I said, it was close going into halftime, but second half happened. But go ahead.
Well, if there's one thing that I'd like to say about that, if you look at the last 2 really successful coaches at Baylor, that was Briles and Rule. Both of them had Baylor in contention for the Big 12 championship within the second or third years, if not outright winning it, and then going on and playing in a lot of big, January 1 bowl games. They did that in a relatively short period of time. Aranda is kind of on the opposite trajectory. He came in, won the Big 12, and since then, it's just been all downhill.
Right. It was kind of regress in a way because he won, I think it was the second season being the head coach for Baylor. They won the Big 12 and went on to the Sugar Bowl and beat Ole Miss there. But like you said, did he also benefit from having Matt Rule players still there, which is yes, it's definitely he did benefit from having Matt Rule players staying on because Randa's name speaks for himself that he's a good coach, good defensive guy, so a lot of players wanted to play for him, which helps a new coach coming in to play, not having to really rebuild from scratch like what Rule had to do when he took over from Baylor after everything took place with all the scandals and all that stuff. So,
and if you look at what that defense was that year, you had guys like Jalen Petrie, who's with the Texans right now and playing lights out. He was amazing on defense. He was around the ball all the time. We don't really have that kind of player on defense today that does so much on the defensive side of the ball to keep Baylor in a game. You know, I talked a little bit earlier about Matt Jones. Matt Jones, he's a great player. He's not a Jalen Petrie, but he's a great player. Since that time, our defense has not had that kind of leadership on the field, and that's a big deal. You know, Petrie was the guy that ran the defense. He got everybody jazzed. He got everybody engaged in the game, and they played above themselves a lot of the times. And so we don't have that right now.
Right. And so, uh, going through, if he gets the turned around and gets I say turn around, they become bowl eligible that he's on. But I think if they aren't in majority of the games that they do lose, if it's close, they probably can still view it. Okay, those are 2 plays, 3. Didn't go Baylor's way. If they went Baylor's way, they'd be on the other side of the fence and with a win column and not in the L column. So, but if they aren't close in majority of the games they lose, the next 6 games, I more than likely they will probably dismiss them. I don't, unless they're just complete blowouts these next 3 games in a row. Then they might say, all right, we'll just finish the season without you. But more than likely, he is planning to keep his job so he can stay there. Being Baylor private school, we don't know what his buyout clause is or any of that because private schools don't have to make that public, so they can keep that disclosed. So they're probably viewing as, okay, if we keep him on till end of the season, his buyout is only X amount versus this amount, and so that might be a deciding factor too on keeping him till the end of the season or dismissing him at the end of the season versus after the next 3 games, depending how those games go. So, which brings me back. I was talking to you a couple weeks ago. If Aranda is dismissed, and we're talking about we need to fire, like Baylor misses, like is missing that high profile offense, just a fun offense that just throws it like it's just like fun. When I was talking with you about a couple weeks ago when y'all came down to visit, I was talking when I said I'll come back to North Texas head coach. I mean, he is benefiting from having Chad Morris there as his QB, who was at TCU, which is also Morris's son. He was SMU's head coach. Went to Arkansas, So anyway, but again, I know it's hard to say if he's a good coach because I mean, came up the ranks fairly quickly. Won at Incarnate Ward there, and then left the head coaching job there and went to Washington State and was the OC there, and then had a good offense going there, and then now he's the head coach at North Texas. But like I say, he has Morris as his QB, which he's good, but he also benefit from having who is Miami's quarterback now, Cam Ward. He had Cam Ward at Incarnate Ward and Washington State, so that's my hesitation is I know he's a great play caller passing wise because he lights it up passing wise, but has he also? And I'm gonna say he probably has benefited a little bit from having 2 solid quarterbacks, while being the head coach / offensive play caller for these past few seasons. But I would think Baylor would look at him because he's a young guy. He's like 38, so he can relate to a lot of the. Not that Aranda can't, but that's why a lot of schools are, I think, trending. If they haven't been there already, but like I feel like they're trending to more younger guy who can relate to some of these kids. Not that they're kids, but this whole scheme is different now in college football with the whole NIL stuff. So, but a guy who can kind of relate more to what's going on with the public now, I think goes well. So I can see Baylor looking at North Texas head coach or Texas State's head coach because he's a young guy and he's done well at Texas State in general. So that might be an option. I'm trying to think another young up and coming guy or a guy that or a coordinator that they could look at. But as of right now, I feel they'll look at those two potentially since they are Texas guy or not necessarily, but currently head coaches in Texas and know the recruiting um, area or so I don't know what your take is on who they might look at or feel if they go that route.
I love the idea of getting someone who's able to build a prolific offense. Um, having great quarterbacks, I think, is a big part of that. But the way you get those great quarterbacks is by recruiting. You have to you have to put something in front of these kids coming out of high school that's going to make them think, "Hey, this is going to showcase my talents as a quarterback." That was one of the things that some of these guys loved so much about Baylor was because of the wide open offense. They're coming in, they're throwing for 400, 450 yards a game, and that's a big attraction for big name quarterbacks. So I think if you've got some of these young guys that are able, like you say, to relate to kids and be able to recruit some of that top talent, it's clear that they can do well if they have the right mix of players. And you may say, well, anybody can do well with the right mix of players. Well, that's not necessarily true. We've seen coaches that had great players and didn't use them correctly, and they weren't successful. So knowing that a guy can do well if he's able to get the right players in, I think that's going to be important. And if these guys are able to do that, I think, Aranda, like you said, Aranda is a great guy. As a person, he is a wonderful, upstanding man. And I really wish in my heart of hearts that he was doing better than he is right now. I I want him to succeed. I want him to be the guy that takes Baylor back to being in contention for the Big 12. I just don't think that's going to happen. And I think it goes back to recruiting not being his strong suit. I think he's good once he has the players in hand. But when he has to go out and attract those players, I think that's where he's not quite as good as some other guys.
Yeah, just real quick, I was just looking on a Reddit board for people who would you consider looking at if Aranda is dismissed, and a lot of people are saying Texas State's head coach or North Texas head coach as potential candidates to really consider. Someone jokingly goes, "Well, I heard Jimbo Fisher's free because A&M is paying that man all 100 whatever it is." Which is so.
I don't want Jimbo Fisher. I'd take Nick Saban over Jimbo Fisher.
Well, don't worry. I don't think Jimbo will be Baylor's head coach because if you thought the offense was
Yeah.
not bad but just painful, him being at A&M when he had pick of the crop to come in for offense and still only did what he did with that, I can only imagine.
Yeah, that was something. There again, that's the guy that had the tools available and didn't know how to use them, didn't know how to put the product on the field, and that's I used to work for a guy that is a huge A&M fan. Went to A&M, kids went to A&M, the whole 9 yards, and that was an exceedingly painful time for him to watch those games and go, how are we losing these games? We have all these players. How are we doing that? So,
yeah, won't get into that. That can be another obviously long discussion with Jimbo and how do you have a Ferrari and you drive it like a Pontiac, or a Buick, however you want to put it. The keys to the fastest car in the world, and you drive it like a PT Cruiser. But my take for before we transition over to the Cowboys and the rest of the NFL season, since we're about a quarter way through. I do see Aranda being dismissed. I don't think they'd make the bowl eligible. Even if they are close games, I still think Baylor decides to go a different direction just to get a new face. And I'm on board with them going with the mayor of Waco and bringing in Chip Gaines to be their head coach. So that's my take for the Bears. So with that, we're going to go ahead and transfer over to Cowboy Nation. Check in with the Cowboys there and how everyone's America's team is doing on the season so far. Overall, they are they 3-2 on the season.
3-2, yeah.
So Cowboys are 3-2 on the season. With that in mind, they lost to the Baltimore Ravens. They were getting beat pretty decently, and then made it close a game, and then they end up also their other loss was to
The New Orleans.
that one was just a blowout. That was not even a game. So so with that, like I said, we'll kind of dive in with the Cowboys here because as Mr. Captain's team here for NFL, and overall stat wise for them on offense. Sorry, I have right here in front of me. Total yards on the season, they are currently ranked 17th in the NFL with 1,647 total yards, averaging 329 yards total a game, which ranks them 15th. They have 972 passing yards, which ranks them 12th, which they are averaging 194 yards passing in a game, which is 11th. Rushing, 675 total yards, 24th, and averaging 135, which also is 24th. And please tell me this is offense and not defense I'm reading off. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Sorry. Bear with me. Hang on. I might have butchered that. Just
Yeah, I think they have 410 total rushing yards this year.
yes. All right. I was reading defensive stats. Bear with me, people. Don't get mad with me.
There's too many numbers. Too many numbers.
I am generally a numbers guy when it comes to stats, but not in school. So, hang on. Did I not write that down? Way to go, me. This is such a mess by me.
Well, I'm looking at the NFL stats, and they're saying they have 1,768 total offensive yards.
All right. Yes.
410 rushing yards.
Okay.
1,430 passing.
All right. So scratch what I said earlier. Offensive wise, they are 10th in the league of total yards with 1,768. 12th in passing yards per game, averaged with 353 yards. They are second in total passing yards with 1,358. Second, averaging 271.6 passing yards per game. We'll come back to the passing touchdowns and interception for Dak's when we talk about Dak in a little bit. As far as rushing, 31st in the league for total rushing yards, 410. They are 31st in average rushing yards per game at 82. And they are 14th in the league with total points at 117, averaging 23 points a game, which ranks them 15th. So that is how their offense is going right now. Seems like typical passing for Dak numbers-wise. He's always been able to pass in the regular season. There's no doubt about that. So as we were discussing with the Bears, passing's there, run game is not there, and that's been a issue for sure. As we've talked about, if you can't run, than primarily passing, which the teams don't have to stack the box as much to stop the run. They can obviously go to prevent defense for passing and put more coverage out there. So, yeah, it's not been fun to watch a running game, even because you have an old thing washed up Ezekiel Elliott back on the team who's there as a body to fill some holes for the time being because he was cheap. And yeah, so with that, I don't know how you are feeling with the offense, if you've been pleased with their performance on offense as a whole besides the run game. I want to know how you feel about all the extensions that they've given out to CD Lamb, Dak Prescott. I can't think they did any other. Micah Parson, who's underperforming when we get the defense as well this year. So your thoughts right now on how the Cowboys offense is going through the first quarter of the season, and do you think they will find the run game at some point?
Well, I think it's a very telling stat when you look at how many minutes Dallas was trailing in games last year, and then the first game this year they blew that out of the water, and that speaks to the lack of production on the offensive side of the ball. I know that Dak and CD had their contract issues, during training camp and the exhibition season, and that's always a distraction. There's nobody that can tell me that you can miss training camp and come to play on day one and be in top form. That just doesn't happen. So from that perspective, that was disappointing. I think a lot of that should be laid at the feet of Jerry Jones for messing around for so long, trying to get those guys deals done. I think that we're not playing at the level that we played last year offensively. I think that when we played the Ravens, I think it was a big wake-up call that we missed a huge opportunity in not getting Derrick Henry. I know he would have been expensive, but when you look at the kind of production he's had this year, he's been a beast. And to have somebody like that in your lineup, I think everybody hoped that Ezekiel Elliott would come back in and be that guy again. And you'll watch him. He'll have a couple of runs where you'll think, oh, that kind of looks like the Zeke of old. That was 10 yards, tough yards that he got pretty much on his own. But then that gets, we have a holding call or illegal shift or something stupid that causes us to lose that play. But I think that they've missed some opportunities in the offseason to really improve the team. They had some notable exits, and they just didn't do enough to shore up the team. Now, from the perspective of Dak, I think he's played reasonably well this year. He's had some great plays. He made, the game with Pittsburgh. That was a Dak win for sure, no doubt about it. But there was also some things that kind of put us in that position to have to come back, to win that game at the end. And I think he's just still a little rusty from off season. I'm hoping that he continues to improve and that he gets smarter about decisions. Throwing a pick there at the goal line, that was costly. That was huge, and you can't have that. The running game, I don't know what they're going to do. Don't know what they're going to be able to do with the running game. I think we're stuck. I don't know if there's a whole lot that can be done about that.
And for the running game, and it's not due to the lack of not having O linemen, because I know Cowboys O line's pretty strong overall. So, like I said, and everyone thought like, oh well, we don't need Zeke anymore. He's too expensive. He's digressing, just running backs in general in the NFL. You know, you get banged up, it happens. So you had Tony Pollard, but Tony got was he? I mean, he did well behind Zeke, but I think that's the same thing when you have a 1-2 punch. When someone is getting stuffed, you have someone who's a different running style, but then you become the main running back. It changes things, and so now he's with Tennessee. I don't know, like you said, if they should have re-signed Tony, um, or getting someone like you said, Derrick Henry. I was like, oh, he's big. Tennessee's doing the right thing for letting him, not re-signing him, but Tennessee also knew they were rebuilding, so that makes sense to keep someone like him in general for what his asking price was going to be. So, like you said, when you have the best GM in the world, Jerry Jones, calling the shots, even though you have a GM there, just in my opinion, it's just have a fall guy when something doesn't go your way. So,
Right. I really think they missed an opportunity there to make a difference for the team. You know, even if they had retained Pollard, I watched a game with him last week, and he's still running tough, and he's still making some plays, and I miss having that in the Cowboys' backfield, that kind of explosive player that can make plays, that can make people miss, that can break that tackle at the line of scrimmage, and get another 6 or 7, 8 yards after first touch, and we're just not getting there. Dowdell every now and then shows some of that, but it's not consistent. At least with Pollard, most of the time he was pretty consistent. And I think he does better when he's got a tandem partner in the backfield to change things up, but they miss him.
So speaking of running backs for Dowdle, was he drafted or signed or by the Cowboys? If you can recall, I'll pull it up here in a sec. I was just curious if you knew off the top of your head. As of right now, he is leading the team in rushing with 221 yards, which currently ranks him tied for 29th in NFL with all just rushing in general across the board. You say, well, it's not too bad, but considering of all things, quarterway through the season, 221 rushing yards is not.
That's not nearly enough. That's not nearly enough.
Right, production and across the board when you only have, like I said, 410 rushing yards on the season is definitely not an ideal stat when that ranks you second to last in NFL on offensive things. Yeah, and then you have Elliott, who has 98 rushing yards on the season. And to go with just rushing in general, they only have 2 rushing touchdowns on the season, so which is also not. Like I said, it's only a quarter of the season. Yes, but it should probably be more around as a team combined, not necessarily one player, just as a team. They should probably be sitting around 7 or 8 rushing touchdowns, I would say. So I know it's NFL trade season or trade deadline is always a weird one because you got to find a player who could potentially fit the scheme that you want on offense. So I don't know if there's a running back out there that they could go trade for that could give them that boost or energy that they're looking for without giving up a lot in a draft pick. I should say giving up because you really don't give up players. You give up more draft picks than players per se in a trade. So yeah, I don't know if there's someone that they looking at if that's even on their radar or not.
I've seen a few names, and you go, yeah, okay, maybe they could contribute. I think they're in a little bit of trouble right now at wide receiver with Cooks being out, and he's going to be out for another 4 weeks or so. Tolbert's kind of come along. Jalen Tolbert's come along and done a decent job, made some good plays here the last few games, but I don't see a back that they could get right now without having to give up a lot. And if you look at where they are today with Dak, I mean Dak is what 31, 32
You talking about age-wise?
age wise. You know, most quarterbacks when they're winning their Super Bowls, they're winning them when they're in their 20s. Not always, but most of the time. And so if you're going to try to put together a team around him to make a real run, you're going to have to be willing to bring in someone that's going to cost you. And I just don't see Jerry doing that.
So Dak's 31 right now. So he'll play this whole season as being 31. He turns 32 in July next year. So, um, yeah. So for someone like Dak, who's been with the Cowboys since he was drafted by them, he's been with them for 8 years already. Like, it's crazy how long, like, quickly it goes by. And speaking of giving up draft picks to get players and extensions, but in your opinion on Dak, do you agree with the extension that they gave to him, which was a 4-year, $240 million contract, including an $80 million signing bonus, with $231 million guaranteed, with an average annual salary of $60 million a year? That starts next year because he's playing at, well, his base salary is just over $1 million this season, but with the signing bonus is $29.2 million. So it's not necessarily a dig at Dak for getting the money. It's more of a, if you're digging at him, it's because of his style of play. When, yeah, he plays great in regular season, but what have you done in the playoffs? And in your mindset, is that extension, I know it's kind of the going rate for QBs nowadays, which is insane when one player takes up almost a quarter of the salary cap. So one is that too much money or just right, and for someone, why do you think Jerry did that versus, you know what, we'll I'm going to say let him walk after the season. They could have and say, you know what, we'll just roll with Trey Lance, draft another QB, or find someone to sign. So I don't know what's your take with that, how you feel.
In terms of whether or not I think it was worth it to give him that kind of money or not, ask me in a couple of years. You know, if we've gone to a couple of championship games or gone to a Super Bowl, yeah, it was worth it. The biggest problem you have, and we see this so many times in the NFL, a player is playing lights out, just doing fantastic, and they get that big contract, and then their production drops off. So I don't think we're not seeing that with Dak right now. I think that we're early enough in the season that, you know, he's going to get better as they go along. I have no doubt that they're going to be in the playoffs. Are they going to win the division? I don't think that's going to happen this year. But I think that they've got an opportunity. I think their biggest issue right now is not so much the offense, although the running game is a huge problem. Running game is definitely a huge problem. I think one of the other things that's going to bite them is the defense. You know, with Dan Quinn leaving and going to Washington, that was a big loss. Not saying that Mike Zimmer's not a great defensive coach. He is. I mean, he was around when the Cowboys were winning Super Bowls. That was his thing. But in terms of the contracts for Dak and CD, CD doesn't seem to be playing with the same level of intensity that he did, say, last year when he got 1,700 yards passing or receiving last year. I think there's something to be said for keeping guys hungry, but it's hard to do that in this day and age of the way contracts and salary caps are structured. And the guy gets the big payday, and most of that money is guaranteed, so it's not based on performance.
Right. Yeah. Or go off your as hungry like for Dak. It is a lot of money. I see him. He's as a guy. He comes off. Um, at least to me, he's still showing productivity. He wants to win because he wants that Super Bowl. Vice versa, let's say the Cowboys won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and his contract was up like it was after the season. Yeah, you could probably easily just mail it in. Like, I want a big payday, but then just kind of coast because I already won a Super Bowl. Yeah, more is always nice. Don't get me wrong, but um, but I won a Super Bowl. I have my ring. Now I want to get paid some more, and now I can just kind of mail it in, like you're saying. For Dak, I think he's going to keep trying to win. I mean, yeah, he just postseason wise has not been good on his. Say.
And make no mistake, I really want him to do well. I mean, I personally, I really like Dak Prescott. I like him. I think I think in a land and in a league where there's so many guys that are, just not worth the time of day. Dak is actually one of the good guys. He's one of the nice guys. You want to see him do well. And I think Jerry really likes Dak. I think he really, really likes Dak. And I think he believes that Dak is going to be that quarterback that takes him to the Super Bowl. But he can't do it by himself.
Yeah.
And it's a little unfair for everybody to expect it to be all him. He's got to have the tools around him. He's got to have the other guys around him to help him get there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're the quarterback getting paid boogos of money, but you don't have a supporting cast to get you there, I mean, I know everyone's the point to blame. It's the quarterback's fault for this and that. Well, it is if all the other pieces are there, but in this case, they have CD Lamb, who got his big contract extension. Currently is ninth in the league with receiving yards with 378, and tied for 23rd with 2 touchdown passes so far. And that puts him tied with the team with Jalen Tolbert, who has 2 receiving touchdowns, and Rico Dowdle as well with 2 receiving touchdowns. So as far as, like I said, Lamb, yeah, I could see him taking his foot off the gas pedal slightly now that he's getting paid good money. Still enough to show that he cares, but he's kind of falling into that line. Well, I got paid. I don't need to go 100 miles per hour to prove anything. So we'll see. But that's the thing with NFL contracts is once you get past that threshold of you're past the guaranteed money part of your contract years, they'll just be like, all right, we're done with you. Like, we'll just move on. But that's when players like, well, I'll need more guaranteed money, so let me put my foot back on the gas pedal and go again. And it's just like, but why are you doing that? You should always 100 miles per hour go. I get it when you're on a team who's just straight doo-doo. I know it's hard to be motivated, but if it is a contract year, you're going to play your heart out so you can get what you feel like is you're deserved from another team that needs a player like you to fill their hole that they're missing on that position. So you we'll keep talking about the Cowboys. So I'm gonna read off defense real quick, which I was reading off beginning, which I thought was offense. My bad. So this is the actual defense stats now for the Cowboys. Uh, so they are ranked 17th in the NFL on points, total points allowed, with 1,647. They're giving up 329 yards, averaging or giving up that per game, which ranks them 15th. They have allowed 972 passing yards, which is 12th, and they are allowing 194 a game, which is 11th. As far as rushing, they are allowed 675 total rushing yards, which is 24th, and they are giving up around 135 yards of rushing it on game, which is also 24th. The consistent number here is 24, so get ready for this. Total points allowed is 121, which ranks them 24th, and they are giving up 24 points a game, which also ranks them 24th in the league. So nothing but consistency there on the defense. You mentioned Dan Quinn leaving to go be Washington's new coach, which stings, but you have Mike Zimmer there as coordinator, who's a well-known coach for defensive side of things. And, again, he's getting acclimated in players. But, again, across the board, someone made the comment as Micah Parsons has not been performing like he has been the previous years. He's not – well, he missed his past week game, didn't he?
He didn't play this past week.
But did he start the season banged up? Is that why he's not performing as well? Or are they just double teaming him and not losing, like I said, players? I don't know if there was guys that were on the D line last year that he benefited from because of just the play calling from Quinn, or just in general Zimmer's play calling you don't get Micah in there, or just being double teamed across the board. Is it, like I said, injuries, play calling, players that left to go to other teams that took away from his production? So,
well, I know that they lost some starters on the defensive line, and those were some run stoppers that they had, and so they don't have that level of player now on the defensive line. So teams can afford to double team Parsons. Because if you watch the game and you watch where he is, he's always around the ball, but he is getting double teamed a lot, and teams are figuring out that if they get rid of the ball quick, that minimizes his effectiveness. But he's still putting pressure on quarterbacks. And, if you look at the style of defense that Dan Quinn had last year, the Cowboys were getting turnovers left and right. They seemed like every week they were getting 2 or 3 turnovers, a couple of picks and a fumble. They did a great job on the turnover battle. That hasn't been the case this year. They've lost something in the turnover ratio this year. I don't think that that's all Micah Parsons. I don't think that's all on him. I think that having DeMarvin and Overshown on the field now, he's almost like a second Micah Parsons, because he is very fast. He's very strong. He seems to be around the ball a lot. So I think between the two of them, they need to spend more time on the field together. Because if they're both on the field together, I think that's going to give offensive lines some fits trying to keep those guys out of the backfield. Because they're so fast and they're so quick, and they're able to get around those offensive linemen. And I'm excited about the defense from that perspective, but the other side of it is they are getting torched on the run, and I don't know what they got to do to get that fixed, but
Right. Looking at the turnovers real quick, so they're -1, -1 on the difference on the season so far. They have 4 interceptions on the season and 1 fumble, so 5 total on the takeaways. But they one thing I didn't even touch on with Dak offense wise, like I said, he's passing yard wise, he's like second in the league for passing yards, which he's always. But he has 8 touchdown passes on the season, which ranks him. I forget where it ranked him. And then he also had 4 passing interceptions. He has did as well. So with to that. So yeah, with parse having another. That's where I guess coming in having another solid defensive pass rusher lineman, kind of like with the Texans, like when you have a key player like Parson or J.J. Watt, even now with the Texans who have Will Anderson, like when you double team them, that's where you need to have another guy who's pretty solid that picks it up to where like, oh, he's getting all the sacks, but you also like, well, why is he getting sacks? Oh, that's because their star player who is like, oh, he's not having a good year. But it's like, but that's because they're having a double, triple team him. So that's where it comes in play to have a good number 2 guy for pass rusher to pick up and get those sacks and do their obviously pressure in general. Because right now, sack wise, Demarcus Lawrence is leading the team with 3 sacks. Micah Parson only has 1 sack. Eric Kendricks has 2. DeMarvin Overshawn has 1. And Chauncey Golston has 1.5 sacks on the season. So coming from Micah, who had probably already like 6 sacks by this time last year. So yeah, I know it's tough, and especially if I know he's out. What was his injury? Was it a foot or
high ankle sprain.
Okay, so which those can linger. Hopefully not for him in this case. So that way he can have productivity there on the line for them.
One thing about Parsons, and this was something that was a theme last year. There were so many times where officials could have easily called holding on the opposing team's offensive line, and they chose not to. And when you watch the replay, it's not like it was just a subtle, tug, or, it was kind of questionable about whether it was a hold. It was blatant. And you're seeing some of that same kind of thing now. And it's interesting that they're not getting those calls. And so when you think about, you say, well, Parsons doesn't have the production this year that he did last year. Well, are they not making those holding calls again that take away some of those big plays that these teams are getting because Parsons isn't getting in on the quarterback? And I'm not trying to say that that's the sole reason why he doesn't have sacks this year, but we're seeing some of the same things we had last year where they just were not calling it. And you even heard the announcers talking about it. It's like, how did they miss that? That was a blatant hold. Why didn't they call it? And there's Micah Parsons again complaining about being held, and they show the replay and it's like, well, he had a valid argument. They weren't calling it. And again, I've seen some more of that this year. I don't know if it's quite as much as it was last year, but I think he is getting double teamed more.
I would put all 5 offensive lines on him. I mean, if you have a guy who's consistently in the top 3 in sacks every year, I mean, you're going to do what it takes to not prevent that star player to get to the quarterback. Um, so with everything we've discussed, offense to defense, in between, are you pleased with how things have gone overall? Think they could be 4-1, 5-0, where they should be at in general? And because you mentioned that you don't think they'll win. I mean, they could win the division, but I think, correct me, you said they may not. You feel like they may not win the division this year. I don't know what team you feel as if will give them or could come out on top. I mean, I know, like I said, it's only early, still fairly early in the season, so I
Well,
was curious.
it's all going to come down to Dallas versus Washington. Whoever wins those games, if one of those two teams takes both of those games, they'll be the ones to win the division. Because right now Washington is 4-1, or 4-1 or 5-1. 4-1, I think.
Sorry, I was just giving. I didn't realize they are 4-1. I did not realize that they were 4. I thought they were either 3-2 or 2-3. I did not realize that they are.
And they are
4-1.
They are playing strong. Jaden Daniels is doing a fantastic job, and Dan Quinn has their defense rocking too.
Yeah, speaking of Jaden Daniels, I'm happy he's doing well. It's just you never know with college players coming out and just quarterbacks in general. It's just like, oh, they're number one. Caleb Williams is a good quarterback. Chicago's benefit very well from acquiring all the picks from Carolina when they wanted to trade up to get Bryce Young. To me, just shows you that Jaden Daniels is hungry, wanting to get after it. Caleb Williams is hungry. I'm not taking anything away from him. Just two different style of play. I feel like Jaden is showing that he is thankful for the opportunity just to play in general, and he doesn't act like he's been in the league. I know it's only his first year, but just his attitude on the field and just the way he's playing, and again, it's just everyone takes criticism differently, but like seeing Caleb Williams, how he interacted with C.J. Stroud after they lost to the Texans early in the season, like C.J. Stroud was just trying to build him up. Hey man, like it's early. I know it stinks. Just the general, just the look in Caleb Williams' face was just like, oh no, another pep talk again from another QB. I'm like, you're a rookie quarterback. The guy's trying to help you along the way, find your path, and so like happy for Jaden Daniels to be doing as well he is with Washington, because honestly, the way how bad Washington has been past recent years, and getting was it Rivers as their head coach because he was with the Panthers. It's like, okay, well, he did good with the Panthers, but again, a coach can only do.
Is Rivera, I think.
Yeah, Rivera, that's it. Yeah. I mean, you gotta have players to do well, which I know he didn't have the best QBs either, but still, but the fact Quinn is doing well with 4-1, start off with what people probably thought they would probably be 1-4, opposite more than likely with the rookie quarterback, just a lot of turmoil, just with the whole ownership and all that stuff, just kind of like what is going on here, but he's got them rocking within the first quarter of the season so far, and so.
And for me as a Cowboy fan, it almost pains me to say that listening to them talk to Jaden Daniels after a game, and you listen to how he carries himself and how he speaks and how humble he is and what a nice kid he seems to be. It's hard it's hard not to root for a kid like that to do well, even if it's with a team that has been an arch enemy ever since you've watched football. So, I, you know, if they can help him keep his head in the game, and they can keep him focused on what's really important, I think they're going to do well with him.
Oh, and this goes back to I thought to touch back on Baylor with head coaches, and I thought it's like, oh, if they need someone offensive of style like to light it up again. This is he's probably also reason why Jaden Daniels is doing as well as he is because Cliff Kingsbury is the offensive coordinator for Washington right now, and I had forgot, and I knew that, I just didn't dawn on me till now. So I think having Kingsbury, who has been around good QBs with when he was head coach at Arizona, and he had Kyler Murray, which Kyler Murray's a great athlete. Head case, in my opinion, he got paid his big money, and I mean he's still doing well. I'm not taking anything away from him, but it's just the drive factor, and he's like, I got my money. I'm gonna just do what I need to, and that's that. Uh, so yeah, Quinn's got a good coaching staff there with Kingsbury. And honestly, like to go with Kingsbury, I think his niche is an offense of coach, not head coach style. Just that way he doesn't have to deal with, as a head coach, you got to deal with everything. Where if you're just a key coordinator, you can focus on strictly that area and specialize in that. And I think that's what Kingsbury strives best, is being an offensive coordinator, mind guy, and focus on that. So with Washington being 4-1, like the Cowboys are 3-2, so they're second currently in the division, and then the Eagles are 2-2, who are third, and the Giants are 2-3. Uh, so for me, Eagles getting Shaquan Barkley was a big key signing for them. I still think, honestly, I think before real quick before we move on to the rest of the NFL, your prediction: Cowboys. You said probably. Do you feel like they? I know it's early. Do they win the division? Yes or no?
I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough for them to win the division this year. I can see them going, 11-6. I can see that. I can see Washington maybe going 12-5, maybe 13-4, maybe if they keep playing the way they're playing right now. I don't. I think Dallas. I mean, if they go in as a wild card, I think they probably go out first round as they've done every other year. I hope they don't. I think they've got a lot. I think they've got a lot of things they need to clean up between now and time for playoffs.
So they at least make playoffs either way.
I think they make. I think they make the playoffs. I think they don't win the division. I think they come in as a wild card. It may even wind up being that they sneak in as a wild card, like they back into it. I don't know. If they can't get some of the issues corrected around the running game, I think that's going to be an Achilles heel for them the rest of the season. I think that's going to make it difficult for them to get any higher than a wild card.
Again, it's only early, still in the season, as we're saying, because currently right now they are in the fourth spot of the wild card, behind Detroit, who has the first spot, the Bears, and Tampa, who has the last spot, and then it's the Cowboys, then Green Bay, Seattle. So, now going back to the Eagles, getting Barkley, I know they needed a running back. I don't think, just to me, they have been underperforming. Someone had posted something. I don't know if it had to do with Jalen Hurts. I don't know if it was a Hurts stat or an Eagle stat in general, but something tied with Jalen, and just ever since the Super Bowl stat or something after they went in, like it was some bizarre stat. I was just like, huh. But I know for Eagles and the head coach there, he if they don't, I don't know if they have to win necessarily Super Bowl, but if they don't perform at least the regular season, they already talking about sending him packing. So, uh, and then same with the Giants. Was it Diebol, whatever the head coach. I mean, same thing. Nothing against Daniel Jones as QB, but I could have told. And I know I don't sit there and study film like the recruiter or the scouts do and all that stuff, but when they took him and did, I was like, I'm not. Hey, awesome! You get to play in a professional level. That's more than we can ever say. But just seeing film, what I know, I was like, that's not a guy who should have been taken that high to begin with. Um, but he's making the best of it right now. He's proven people wrong so far this season, playing better than he has currently. What the situation is for him there. Um, but Giants won't make playoffs. I can tell you that right now. So
No, I don't think they make it. I don't think they make it.
um, I do at least think two teams from the NFC East are in, being the Cowboys and Commanders, or Cowboys and Eagles get in. Not that the Commanders collapse. I just we'll see how they, like I said, just rookie quarterback and just in general. I mean, a lot left to be played in general. Um, as for my Texans, they are sitting the 4-1 on the season, so can't be too. It's pretty good. As expected, their one loss was to the Vikings. They got blown out badly, so that was. Which I was told, someone was talking. I was like, "Do you think the Texans are gonna do well this season?" I was like, "They have a chance to do well again, but also don't be too shocked if they not salary regress, but they're like, well, they won 9 games last year, whatever. They benefit from having a weak schedule, and then they took advantage of it when they got good drafted C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, and having other good players on the team, so they benefit from that. But now, when you finish first in your division, you got to play the first place team from all the other divisions in your AFC, and then along with the rest of your schedule. So it is a very tough schedule for the Texans, but to be 4-1 to start the season is where I would like them to be. Because honestly, I thought that they could easily be 2-3, to just because um, they always never seem to not show up, but they just, in the past, is like they take care of teams like Jacksonville, who they should do. But when I saw Buffalo, and I was like, but they beat Buffalo, so I mean,
That's not insignificant.
so I'm pleased so far. They have a shot. I'm not trying to get too ahead of myself with looking at the next 4 games hypothetically, but it would be a Texans thing for them to lose to the Patriots this weekend. And I wouldn't be completely shocked if it did happen, to be honest. A couple guys are out this weekend, but not enough to lose to the Patriots, who I think are starting Drake May, which was the rookie quarterback they drafted. So, yes, they should win, and hopefully they do win. But what I'm getting at is looking at I don't want, unless I didn't want to get too far ahead for the next month, because they play New England at New England, and then this one is up in the air. I say, because they're going to at Green Bay, just because it's Green Bay. It's always a tough crowd to play in the stadium. Luckily, it's still early, so it's not snowing or anything like that there. But and then the Colts always play them close, and then they go to New York to play the Jets, and with that, I was like, well, the Jets aren't doing so hot, but they also just fired their head coach.
So I don't know. We'll see what the Jets will look like in a month with the, them firing Robert Slay and demoting Thackett out of play calling and putting the passing game coordinator in place to be the new OC to see if that sparks offensive life for the Jets. So, like I said, I don't want to get too much health saying that, that's all easy 4 winnable games for the Texans. Like I said, anything can happen. But looking at that, they should be able to beat the Patriots. They could go 2-2 the next 4 games. They can go 4-0. I would worst case scenario is going 0-4, 1-3, but I at least think they can win 2 of the next 4, if not 3 out of the 4, and be sitting pretty good in the driver's seat there for the division of the AFC South, because the Titans are not good this year as everyone expected, because we know they're rebuilding. And as much as Tennessee's 1-3 and Jacksonville's 1-4, and everyone thought, was like, well, they have Sunshine as their quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. I don't know about you, but for a guy who they praised to be like the next, like, holy cow, this guy is going to be the next Peyton Manning, just in and out. And Trevor, I'm not saying he's done good. I mean, he got his contract extension too, and so, but I mean, that's just like we were talking about. You have to pay a quarterback X amount of number now, because is there anyone better out there currently than what you currently have to sign for less, or do you start all over again and take a chance on drafting? But if someone, I was talking to someone in general, let's say the quarterback is coming up on a end of his current contract, and his time's already kind of like Aaron Rodgers. And I just say he's done his time there. He's coming on, but it's like, all right, do we draft a quarterback and develop him, and just kind of start that like cycle? Like, all right, we have a quarterback, because if you draft a quarterback in the first round, if they do well, you have them for 5 years. If you have a system in place that's a well-oiled machine theoretically, and you can find the guy that fits the system, could you get around not paying these insane numbers to quarterbacks? So, but that's not going to happen in general, because that'd be like, why would you always go through that? Because what if you don't find that quarterback that fits? Which I get, that's a risk to take, but still, this goes back to Tom Brady when he was with the Patriots. He was never paid the highest amount for a quarterback. He easily could have, but he goes, if I was to do that, we wouldn't be able to keep these players that have helped us win these Super Bowls 6 times or whatever it was when he was with New England. So, you have to, players, they don't think that, they just think money in my pocket. So, because someone asked Patrick Mahomes, it's like, well, how do you feel about these other quarterbacks getting bigger contracts than what you did? He goes, well, I'm happy where I'm at. Like, he's like,
that is so refreshing to hear somebody say that they realize that it's not just them that makes the team. There are other guys that contribute to that, and it's very, and say what you want to say about Mahomes. I mean, he has the right attitude. And when you have the right attitude and you have the talent and you have the people around that talent, you're going to be a perennial favorite every year. And like you say with Brady, it's weird for me to think about, oh, it should be easy to beat the Patriots. For the longest time, if you had to go up against the Patriots, it was like, I don't know if we're going to come out of this game alive. And now we're shifting that focus. And I like the fact that there are other teams that are becoming that. But listening to someone recognize that it's not just about them, that there are, there's 52 other guys on the roster. And if you don't have the right mix of 52 guys, doesn't matter how good the quarterback is, you're not going to win.
exactly. Because if you have a guy that eats up all your money, you can't get guys to keep making the team better. And so with Mahomes in general, it's when you, in general, if you're set to make $80 million, let's just say, whatever it is that $20 million more going to make your life that much different? Point is, so you, again, players aren't, well, someone like Mahomes will recognize that as like, I don't need $20 million more that I could get with this other team, because that's not going to change like how I live my life. So why not say, all right, I'm getting paid at the time what I was playing at. Yeah, I'm still a top quarterback, but I'm not going to sit here, because they're going to do what they did with Tom Brady. They're going to start converting to signing bonus so he gets paid more but doesn't hit the books, so that way they can keep signing position players to help Mahomes out and defense-wise, so that way they can always be in contention every year. So
if it were me, I I would be willing to take less to be sure that I'm on a team that is a perennial favorite to win it all every year. And you know, you think about a guy like Mahomes. I mean, what is he making in endorsements too?
Exactly. Endorsements. I mean, it's like, not to get too off, but it's like Ohtani signing his $70 million per year deal with the Dodgers, which all deferred, and he only makes like $2 million a season. But with his endorsements, he does make like $50 million a season. So same with Mahomes. I'm pulling up his current contract. So just, but give or take, yeah, with all his State Farm spokesmanship, he's part owner of the Royals. They're in Kansas City now, or however honor thing. So I'm sure he gets a sliver of that. I mean, there's no doubt he probably takes home at least, let's see, a good chunk of change. He's 29, so he's, let's see. And he was the one when they drafted him. I was like, I mean, that's a big gamble on a guy not because he was at Tech and he did well there. But I was like, a guy who generally would come out of an offense like that, it's just kind of like, how does that?
It's hard to transition.
Right. How do you transition to NFL? But I mean, that just seems to be more the case now. It's not really a whole lot of true pro style offense in college anymore. To a guy can just hop in. You gotta do growing pains with them and work with them, and that's where are they trainable, teachable.
Right.
But sorry. So as for Mahomes, he had his 10-year extension, which was $450 million, which was the largest ever at the time. So he currently did a lot of restructuring. I can't keep up with how they. It's hang on. He's looking at Sport Track. So his base salary this year is $9.8 million. Then when he did a signing prorated stuff, so with the signing prorate was $6.1 million on top of that, and then restructure with $12.1 million. Ross, so $37 million. I think he is making this season that hits the cap. So, and then, but next year it goes up because it goes 16 million. Then they did a lot of restructuring to get underneath the cap with his current. But it goes to show you that he was willing to renegotiate. He still gets his money, but their bank is like, oh, we'll give you up front now. Like, we're good with, because you've proven that you deserve money up front versus playing out your contract that where it becomes non-guaranteed money anymore. So for him, he's set. And then, like I said, for endorsements, so let's say he is only making his $38 million this season, but with endorsements, he's probably up to $50 million, 60 easily with all that. So,
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money to play a game.
That's a lot of barbecue you can eat in Kansas City. Him and
Kelsey.
well, Kelsey too, but Reed.
Yeah.
So but so Texans are leading the South. If they can have a good next month, they should be in the driver's seat at least to win the South. Maybe they can finally. I say finally. Out of all the years that they made the playoffs, they've never gotten past the second round of the playoffs. They've won the wild card round always, but they always had to go play the Patriots. With Tom Brady, time they would lose, or several years ago, and they against the Chiefs, and they jumped out to like a 21-3 lead and blew it, and they lost. And so, but they never gotten past. Was that the divisional round? I think the second round. So Texans have never gotten past the divisional round in their franchise career. So maybe this is the year they can finally get over that hump and get over the divisional round and make it to the conference finals, or AFC championship game. And do it. I don't think they make the playoffs. They are doing like they come out. Like what I said, don't be shocked if they can easily not easily, but I say what I said, don't be disappointed if they finished at 7-9 on the season, only because they were playing a much stronger, tougher schedule compared to last year. So that was my own thing. It's not that they are going to be worse. It's just they were playing much stronger teams, and someone like Stroud, who's only his second season, but I was looking at stats right now. He is top 5 in passing yards this season, so he's got that going well for them. And then running game, they've been getting by past couple games with Mixon being hurt due to his high ankle sprain, which he's questionable for Sunday's game with the Patriots. So if they can get him back, which I was happy. They needed a running back. Pierce was good to fill in. He's a great number 2 guy and just back there. But when the Texans traded him for like a 7th round pick because the Bengals were about to just cut him just to save money, they're like, we'll give you a 7th round pick because Mixon fits that style of play calling, just the unique dynamic running back he is. He can run and catch passes and do all that stuff. So, and then give him an extension. I was happy with.
I think that was a good pickup. I think that was a good pickup for him to get Mixon.
So having him, it stinks. We lost Nico Collins for 4 weeks due to a hamstring injury, so that kind of hurts the wide receiver part. I know we have Stephon Diggs, but having a 1-2 combo, just like defensive end, pass rush, if you double team one guy, the other one who's solid should benefit from that. And so Stephon's been a team leader since they traded for him from Buffalo. And this is a contract year for him, so he's playing with some oomph as well, just so that way he can benefit getting a contract that fits his wants as well. And if he does well, if the Texans, they'll have money too if they want to re-sign him. I'm okay with that. I like Stephon, so I think keeping him around and having Nico, who's with extending him already as well, so it keeps their wide receiver core together. But now that he's hurt with the hamstring, so Stephon will be targeted more at least, and then the other wide receivers will have to come into play. Tank Dell is a good receiver, but he's kind of like a Brandon Cooks, a younger Brandon, like just a good slot guy. So he's a key one to have. So as far as defense wise, Texans, like I said, Petrie, he's a ball hawk. That's always. Texans have always struggled in secondary as long as I can remember, and it's just so frustrating. It's like, how can I wanted them to have like a secondary that teams were afraid of back in the day when the Steelers had Troy Polamalu and Ed Reed was with the Ravens, and that was that's a scary secondary. Like I know they had other key players to go along, but that's a scary secondary to go try to throw against. But now they have Stingley, the guy they drafted from, I think, Georgia as for the first round pick. He's out this week against the Patriots, but he's been having a great rookie campaign at cornerback. Throwing Petrie as safety, and then having so like it's looking like they have a very strong secondary if they all stay healthy and can play to their full potential. And so I'm happy with how the secondary is coming along the past couple years for the Texans. Their front line lacks and linebacker core. I mean, they have Anderson, who's a stud. The same thing, he's getting double team, which opens up the other side. But they need to get a couple of other player. I mean, they did, but just depth wise, it's not there. And same with linebacker core, solid linebackers, but they're missing another really true like defense playmaker on, at least for the linebacker and defensive line. But no reason why they should, going back to the Texans shouldn't not make the playoffs now based how they started this season. Going with that, they don't have any major injuries to key star players like C.J. Stroud. So, I would say going from there, looking at the AFC West, the Chiefs are in the driver's seat right now at 5-0. Denver 3-2, Chargers 2-2 with Jim Harbaugh, his first year there, and then the Raiders are 2-3, which that's a mess there. Their head coach, not to knock him, but because he filled in as an interim last year after they fired Josh McDaniels, I believe. Yeah, I don't see him lasting the whole season there. I think Davis will just be like, nope, not working. You're gone, and they're back to the drawing board again. So they're a wreck mess there, just across the board. They need help everywhere. AFC East, Buffalo 3-2, Jets 2-3, Dolphins 2-3, and the Patriots 1-4. There's no reason why Buffalo shouldn't win that. I feel like Dolphins, if they have Tua, they could be battling again, but with Tua out and just the whole thing kind of is a mess on the offensive side for the Dolphins right now with him being hurt. Same thing, Jets firing Robert Slay, so maybe they revamp and dismissing Thackett, so it gives them maybe new life on offense with Aaron Rodgers and all that stuff. So they could get things going on offense-wise. So I do think one of the teams in the East takes a wild card spot there. And then for AFC North, Baltimore 3-2, Pittsburgh 3-2, Cleveland 1-4, and Cincinnati 1-4. The disappointment there is Cincinnati at 1-4. Cleveland, nothing makes me happier. Not that it's because Cleveland, is because of Deshaun Watson. So, someone said he has settled more sexual whatever he was getting in trouble for than he has thrown touchdown passes since he went to Cleveland. So
that's really sad. I think they need to cut. I think they need to cut bait on that.
Well, I mean, then this goes back to the contract. They were dumb to do this. I know they were basing off like, well, he did XYZ with the Texans, so he was a good quarterback. Like, he did perform very well with the Texans, yeah. So like, okay, well, if we get him, if he does that, we have players, we can. But to guarantee his entire contract, he's getting every single dime of that contract, unless something outside of that negates that. But same thing. It's kind of like the whole Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies contract. I was like, now they learn from those mistakes, and most teams are like, no, we're never fully going to guarantee someone's contract unless that person has won 5 straight Super Bowls, and so.
Yeah, I know what they were thinking. Don't know what they were thinking about when they guaranteed that like that, especially with all the problems he's had. It's just, I don't get it.
Right, son. He's definitely not performed at all for since he's been there. So, like I said, nothing against Cleveland. It just makes me happy that Deshaun's not doing well because of the way he just acted the last season with the Texans. And I know it was frustrating as a fan, as like, well, we have a franchise quarterback, and then he's being vocal, like, hey, consider this person and this, and then I want to be traded. And it's like, so what is it now? And so, but hey, we benefited from it. We got another franchise quarterback out of it, which, again, nothing against CJ Stroud. What quarterback has come out of Ohio State in the past 20 years that has done well there and succeeded in the NFL?
Not many.
Right, not many.
many.
So, again, nothing against Stroud, but he has got in the driver's seat and said, let's go. And he's done that. And so I cannot.
I really like his attitude. I love watching him play, and I love watching how he reacts after the games and how he handles himself. I think he's another one of those guys you could call a really good guy in the league, and I really want to see him do well, and I think he's going to.
Yes, he's well liked. I personally like a quarterback who's quiet. Like, he's not, like, when he talks on the camera, he's quiet. He's not flashy in any way or this and that. He's just a straight, humble, genuine guy, and that's what I like. I just want someone to come in here who's just takes it on, and he's done that, and it's been great. And so, yeah, Deshaun was a 5-year, $230 million contract, which was all guaranteed. And so, Cleveland has this year with his current contract and 2 more years, and then there's a void for the 27, which basically they have 2 more years on top of this year left of his insane contract that was fully guaranteed. So I think most people would realize, like, that's just dumb. Like, why would you do that? To guarantee that much money for a quarterback who, one, hadn't played in almost 2 years due to wanting to be traded from the Texans, so he sat out that whole season, and then was suspended the first 11 games the following season due to the off-field issues with getting happy endings and more than that as well. So that, but going back to Cincinnati, I know they lost some close games, but just same thing. I didn't expect them to be 1-4 in the season. I at least thought they would be 3-2, maybe. I would say 4. More likely, probably more on the 3-2 record, I would say. So they're a team that just having Burrow and Chase duo, like, so so they're not performing to the best. So I feel like they might be able to get turned around and sneak in as a wild card team, but that's in football, or being 3 games below 500 is a very tough hole to dig yourself out of. So
Is Burrow still suffering from a wrist injury he had?
that's what everyone's wondering, because he seemed kind of like stretch his wrist out or his thumb, whatever his injury was. I think he's keep him. So this is after last night's game between the Seahawks and 49ers. So Geno Smith is leading the league in passing yards now, and then Brock Purdy's number 2. But they did play last night, so that's why they're up there. But even with them, Burrow's number 6 right now with 1,370 passing yards. So he's throwing the ball well. I think the defense side of things just kind of, and he's leading the league in touchdown passes with 12. Burrow is, so it's not necessarily on Burrow reason lack of winning. I generally think defense is struggling on their end. So, and then shockingly, here's another guy who, former Cleveland quarterback. Again, they did what they thought. He wasn't, to their eyes, he wasn't playing well, but he's found his role and is working well. Baker Mayfield, 11 touchdowns.
Yeah.
11 touchdowns on the season, so he's tied at number 2 with Sam Darnold, who also has 11 touchdown passes. So good for Baker. He got his contract, which wasn't a big, fat, juicy one like all these other ones, but he got taken care of, and Tampa's got him a solid quarterback to fill their need there until they find the next one to take over. Once I would imagine once his contract's up, he'll be nearing close retirement or however they want to work it. But
The one thing I like about watching him play, he plays like he wants to win every play. I mean, you can tell he's definitely given 100% every time he's out there on the field. And I know that he expects everybody else to do the same thing. And I think that's translating into something for them that's generating wins. And I do like seeing that. I mean, I've not always been a huge Baker Mayfield fan, but I like watching his style of play. I like watching his attitude when he's on the field.
did you see what happened with I think Tom Brady was calling their most recent game this past weekend, I think, or last. They asked Baker, "What's it like playing here where Tom Brady was at?" And it wasn't like a dig or anything. And he's like, "Well, just I'm more a relaxed person or something." And of course, Tom Brady, people took it like it was a dig at Baker and Tom, and they asked Baker in the post game interview or whatever, and he's like, y'all took it out of context, whatever. It's like nothing against Brady, his style. I think when Brady goes, well, he goes, sorry for me wanting to win. That's why I have 6 Super Bowl rings while you still have 0, or something like that. It was just, but
a little catty exchange there.
So,
right.
Right. Brady was right in that, but everyone has what works and takes the edge off people, and so, but good for Baker, playing well in Tampa right now, and so they are. Let's see, they are. Hang on, Tampa is 3-2, tied with Atlanta for first place, and the Saints, who are 2-3, and the Panthers, who are 1-4, which they are a long, long way away from ever being up there, back in contention again. Bryce Young, just unfortunate situation. I mean, he's learning behind. What's his name? Sorry. He was a Bengals quarterback for the longest time. He's from Katy. He went to Katy High School. Played at TCU.
Andy Dalton?
Yeah, Andy Dalton. Yes, that's right. So Andy Dalton's there. Was signed as backup to Bryce Young, and then of course with Young struggling and stuff, so they went to Dalton. So nothing against Bryce Young. Just learn, but also they gave up so much to draft up to get him. They don't have key players yet, supporting cast to help him, so it's just a lost cause right now with him there. So hopefully, but to go back, he's acknowledged what's going on right now. He's learning from it and developing from it to where like other players who would just be like, no, better. Like if this was Caleb Williams, I think his attitude would be poor. He would probably be throwing a fit and just whatever, want to be traded the next day. Like, this is unacceptable. So, Bryce Young goes in the category is well liked. He wants to win, and so he's going to do what it takes to better himself, and that means having to sit on the bench and learn from Dalton for this season, just to kind of work on a few things and then get back out there, or find the right coach. I mean, look at Tua. I mean, he had his differences with Brian Flores, which was just. But bringing in McDaniel or whatever the current works well. So maybe find the right coach to get him on the right track. So.
Well, but I think the important thing with him is that he, at least right now anyway, he's willing to accept what's happening and is treating it like a learning experience and to better himself so that he plays better. And when he plays better, everybody else hopefully plays better along with him. You know, he can bring everybody else up if he's playing well. And I think with that kind of attitude, I think that'll help.
So, yeah, Panthers, with giving away a bunch of draft picks, they're a long ways off from at least drafting solid guys. I mean, they'll have to sign guys in the offseason to help get going in the right direction, but they're at least a couple seasons away from having – I think this upcoming draft, they finally get some picks that they had traded away to Chicago. So they finally, I think, have a first-round pick again, I believe. I'm not too sure. Hopefully not, because if they're doing – I'm pretty sure they have their first-round pick this year. So, yeah, that was the South. That's going to be a toss-up. Only one – whoever wins the South – is the only team that I think makes the playoffs for there. I think a lot of teams are going to beat each other up, and just Falcons with Kirk Cousins, which helps, but yeah. And then New Orleans.
I don't see them going anywhere ultimately, but
so
maybe they will.
The NFC North. I did not have Minnesota being 5-0 to start the season.
Yeah. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I don't know where that came from, and I'm trying. I mean, obviously they whooped up on the Texans, but I mean, they Giants. I mean, they beat the 49ers, but they didn't have McCaffrey, so it's hard to say. They beat. Let's see, they beat the Giants, 49ers, Texans, Green Bay, and the Jets. So those are their wins right now on the season. So, but still, good for them coming out 5-0. Going with Sam Darnold as a QB due to I forget his name. They drafted Michigan's quarterback, but he had to get knee surgery before the season started, and so they said, "Let's go ahead and just do knee surgery. You'll miss the season. That's fine," because they're like, "We're not expecting, not that they were going to be bad, but I think they feel like they were still missing a couple key players to put them back into contention and hunt again." So they're like, "You know what, let's just get through the season. We have a veteran quarterback with Darnold here, so we're in a good spot to where let's just do that." I like Dan Campbell and Detroit Lions. He's just a fun guy to watch. He motivates the players. He's just a very passionate guy. So Detroit's 3-1. So Texans do play Detroit this year, so that should be a fun game to watch when they play them in 5 weeks or so. I don't think they played them on Thanksgiving.
The Lions are one of those teams now that I don't want to say you dread playing them, but you know you're going to get a tough game when you're playing the Lions. Doesn't really matter what their record is. You know, they've got a good team now, and they've got a good scheme, and I think they're going to give the Cowboys. I think they're going to give the Cowboys a fit this weekend.
That's right, they are playing this week against each other. Chicago 3-2, and Packers are 3-2. So, growing pains with Chicago, with Caleb there, he's turned it around from the first couple games, like I said, but I think they're finally utilizing some of the other players around him to take the pressure off of him to right now. So, and then for Green Bay, it's just I know their quarterback Love was out for a couple games, and so but he was back last week, and so yeah, we'll see how that North pans out, and then the West. You would say, oh yeah, San Francisco should run away with it, but everything was based off McCaffrey for that offensive. Everything goes off of him. So they're 3-3. They beat the Seahawks last night in Thursday Night Football. So they are or I guess in the driver's seat for now. But like I said, they're 3-3. Seahawks are 3-3. Arizona's 2-3, and the Rams are 1-4. So yeah, I don't know what to say about the West. I think the 49ers probably win it more than likely. Arizona, first year. Was it first year or second? No, it's the second year with their new coach. So, still, yeah. I mean, I don't know what to really expect with them, other than Murray has a wide receiver to throw to now with Harris Jr. there, but again, it's only a quarter way through the season. We'll see how continues to pan out. If you were to ask me, I going to say Jaden Daniels wins rookie of the year for offense, because they do offense and defense for rookie of the year, right? So I think Jaden Daniels, the way he's playing, keeps it up. I can see him winning rookie offense of the year. Defense, I can't keep up with defense because nothing is defense. I just between quarterbacks and defensive ends and pass rushers and all that stuff. So, and then as far as like actual MVP, with it being so early, those we were talking about. Like I said,
I heard somebody putting Jaden Daniels in that conversation. I mean, it's still very early, but
it is early. I mean, did Derrick Henry ever win a MVP with the Titans?
I don't remember that he did. I don't think he ever did.
Again, Jordan Mason's leading the league in rushing yards, but it's also he played last night where Derrick Henry hasn't played yet for this week, and he is at 572 rushing yards on this season with 6 rushing touchdowns. So,
That's more than the whole Cowboys team.
yes, that's what 3 times this amount because they only have 2 rushing yards on the season. So, yeah, I'm trying to look at stats in general. I'm gonna say Derrick Henry's top there for MVP. Let's see, for passing yards for Jaden Daniels, he's at 1,135, which puts him in. He's 12th in the league right now with passing yards. So,
Well, and if Lamar Jackson keeps playing like he's playing, you got to have him in the mix too. Him pulling out that last second touchdown last week was just, I couldn't believe he pulled that off.
yeah. So Lamar,
around on the ground and he picked it up.
right? So Lamar with 1,206 passing yards, 9 touchdown passes, and only 1 interception so far. So, He's playing MVP caliber season, or as right now, maybe he'll have back-to-back MVP seasons. But again, a quarter way through. If picking right now, based how teams are playing, trying to think who could we see in the Super Bowl a quarter way through the season right now. NFC wise,
You'd almost have to have Minnesota in that conversation, just based on how they're playing right now.
yes, if you're looking at just base right now, Minnesota definitely. I still think Detroit's the better team between those two. I think. Yeah, no stuff. I would say Detroit makes it into the Super Bowl, and they would probably go against.
The Texans.
No, Texans don't make it because Texans are going to Texan and they'll just not that they wouldn't show up in the playoffs. I don't know. I just maybe Baltimore gets it together and gets with Kansas City. The issue with them is they lost a couple guys like their number one receiver. I know they have Kelsey and stuff, but I think they lost some players already, and they're kind of banged up across the board. I mean, they'll make the playoffs, and they're always. I mean, you have Mahomes, so I mean, it's a given that they're going to be competitive, and they're still winning right now. So, but if Lamar Jackson is playing the way he is right now, and can same thing with like Dak Prescott, if he can get over the hump and play good football in the playoffs, they can get past and finally get into the Super Bowl with him. So I can see Baltimore and Detroit based off right now. So
It could be an interesting game.
it could be because the Super Bowl is where this year is the Super Bowl is. Oh, New Orleans.
Yeah, Superdome.
So Saints won't be there. I can tell you that. So.
No, they won't be.
They are starting Spencer Rattler this weekend because Derek Carr's out with an oblique injury or something like that. So they're going with Spencer Rattler, who they drafted in the 4th round or 5th round this past draft. So, but yeah, it should be fun the rest of the season. Like I said, only quarter way through, so we'll definitely when the season wraps up, we're like, man, we are way off on that. That happened with me and George, the Greek, as he goes by for this. When we talked after we did a quick season wrap up of baseball and did playoff take, and I was like, because honestly, I was like, okay, if the Astros can play like they did the last month, like solid baseball, but I know playoff baseball, anything can happen. I was like, there's a shot they could be back in the LCS again for the 8th straight year and play the Yankees again, which would have been fun. But Astros got bounced, and so like listening to all this, like I was like, oh, it could be the Astros or Yankees. I was like, I think it's gonna be the Yankees and I think I said the Yankees and Phillies or something like that. Well, Phillies lost and they're out now, and so just yeah. So what I'm gonna discuss on is like, who knows what can happen. It's just just way sports goes in general. Anything can happen.
Well, it's like they say, any given game, any given Sunday.
So, but yeah, we'll see how the rest of the season goes. So that's going to do it. We'll see, like I said, with the Bears, how they finish out the season, and same with the Cowboys and the Texans. And so go your favorite football teams that you cheer for.
It's been a pleasure, and always feel free to shoot me an email at the glass podcast at gmail.com. AT, not the at symbol, so don't get confused with at. Only do that at the so at the glass podcast at gmail.com. As always, it's been fun sipping with y'all, and until then, I will talk with y'all later.